Hassan, just tell us about your business.
Oh, thank you, Natasha. So my business involves applying economies of like sharing economy really in the B2B, the business to business context. It is essentially a service that offers staff sharing between non-competing businesses. So that if one business is going through a lull in work or a tough spell and suddenly has underutilized capacity, that business can hire out or share its underutilized capacity of staff and people to a non-competing business that is at the other end of the scale, where it's stretched for resources, which would normally go for freelancers or contractors to fulfill the temporary demand for extra resources. And in this operation, in this process, what happens is that it achieves not just improving the productivity of both companies, but also helps protect the jobs of the people involved. It reduces the risk of making unwanted redundancies or cutting wages or switching from permanent full-time contracts to 0 hours contracts, etc. So that's really, in a nutshell, what the business offers.
Right, so it's called the Hive, is that right?
TheHIVE Enterprise,
The Hive.
yes.
Cool. So
hence the bees.
Hence the bees. So I wasn't completely mad. So with this, so the idea being, so you've got kind of two benefits there. So I can see you're talking about for the employees themselves. So the idea that you're sharing. So does it typically work? It's a larger company sharing staff with a smaller company, or does it tend to work quite equally?
Oh, we see situations where two smaller companies team up so that they can support each other, because as they team up, they can perhaps bid for bigger projects and also help each other, sort of knock on each other's doors every now and then and say, hey, I've got extra resources. Are you happy to borrow them for this and that? It tends to be around the back office support, but equally works really well if a big company wants to use this as a learning and development exercise, upskilling staff that perhaps want to offer them an opportunity to go and work in a form of secondment on another project with another company and come back after 3 or 6 months' time, ready to break into, perhaps a more senior role.
Yeah. Okay. So it's sharing staff. So you could literally kind of between the two of you, kind of sharing people. How would it work? So if I was running my own company now, and I kind of think, well, actually, I haven't got enough work for this person to do right now because of COVID and everything else. How would I go about setting something up with you?
So we've created a portal in which clients would set themselves up and actually share the CVs of the people that they would like to offer, or share a job description where they're hiring or looking for talent. And our role is to actually achieve this match, a good match between those two companies. So it's a CV to job description match, goes through our vetting process internally just to make sure that everything is aligned. And then we introduce the two companies to meet up. They can discuss the project requirements, talk about the terms, duration, rates and budget, etc. And if they come to an agreement, that's when they can sign a business-to-business contract, which we prepare as well. And the beauty of it is that it's very similar to what you normally see between, for instance, a consultancy and its business client. Very similar terms. The only difference is that it stipulates a form of secondment of employees from business A to business B. But for us as a business, that's when we actually trigger how we monetize this. We claim a 10% commission on any transaction that generates revenue for a company. So a company makes money, that's when we actually get a 10% commission.
Right. So I was going to ask you about your business model then. So you see the portal, so effectively a bit like a dating agency, really. So the companies can come together, they can find out each other what they do, and they can share the CVs of their people. So that portal, is that available? Do you have to pay to join to get onto that portal? So that's all available?
It's designed to be for free, no subscriptions involved. And it's one of those projects that requires a bit of time to build a pool of clients. But then a chain reaction takes place where
I'm going to come back to your chain. I like that. So I've just to make sure I'm clear on the business model. So come in, so this 10% then, so company comes in, you say 10% of the money made. How it means, so if I have an employee, so therefore I'm then say you can borrow my employee. Borrow sounds like borrowing a dog, but no, you can have my employee for a period of time, say for a secondment.
Yeah.
And then so they would then pay that. So how does the money change hands? So they would then would the employee be paid by that company, or is it still coming through my PAYE?
No, so the employee's contract is unaffected, and that's one of the reasons why this is appealing to companies. So the employee protects the employee's contract. Their pay is unaffected, and the employer, the the employer of that employee will invoice the company using this shared member of staff for the hours and the time delivered, which obviously funds their work. So a good comparison to this, if you think about it, it's like a furlough scheme, but between businesses. So if a company is going through a tough spell, instead of furloughing staff, they can actually share them out to another business that pays their wages.
So rather than them sitting at home binging on Netflix, they actually can be working in that time as well.
Yeah.
So when you're so it's that invoice. So when they invoice, is that where you get your 10% fee from that invoice?
Correct. Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of with you. And how do so I can see a lot of companies quite excited by this, because it's going to, as you say, kind of productivity. It's not having, and actually from an ease of doing it, it's not so complex, because you don't want to get rid of somebody and then try and get them back and everything else.
Yes.
How do the employees themselves feel about it? Because really they joined a company that they like the culture of, they're interviewed for, and then hang on a minute, how much say do they have as well?
I always love this question, because it's one of the things that I learned myself without even realizing what I'm gonna, without even knowing what I'm gonna see or face. So the interesting thing is that companies and managers and employees who do not have the mindset of, I love my job, I want to protect my contract, I want to stay with this company, there's an element of loyalty between myself and my employer, they would never be interested in what we do. So essentially, whoever comes and joins already comes in, filtered in with that mindset of, I want to collaborate, I want to make it work, I want to protect my job, I'm really interested about the idea of jumping on this new project. And then a lot of times, employees actually feel excited because it's a form of, I'm jumping on to try something different. This is an opportunity for me to learn skills. And I know that I'm investing in not only protecting my job, but also funding my progression within my company. As I mentioned to you, it's a good way for a company to send out someone, develop their skills, come back so that they can justify that promotion that they've been looking for.
Yeah, so it's not, so in terms of the value, because you mentioned there was a number of things about the kind of value, what people are getting back. So you mentioned this thing about kind of productivity. So in terms of that employees' productivity, they're learning new skills. You're not having to make people redundant. And I think actually you've got a question that's already coming in on the chat as well. Is the charge out rate to the borrower the same as what the employer is paying their employee? That was a question from Christopher.
That's a good question. So ideally, we advise them to not exceed 120% whatever the full-time rate is. Otherwise, it's not going to be exciting for the hiring party to engage in this, because they can go for contractors which are above that sort of mark. But at the same time, we really are asking ourselves the question of what is the alternative here? Because mind you, this is a company who either looks at the books and says the balance between my cost of human capital and the revenue I'm making is not quite right. I need to fix it or improve it at least. Or if it's in an extreme case, they may have to, furlough staff so they're getting 80% pay as opposed to 100% pay, or making people redundant, and they don't want to do that. They don't want to make them redundant. They are, loyal and talented people that invested heavily in. So it is the alternative that dictates what the rates are. So if they say, I'm happy to loan them out at the full-time rate, just cover my, the wages, that would be fine by me. And more often than not, that what we end up having.
And do you envisage this being a long-term thing? So I can imagine, so there's a very obvious thing in our market right now, something we can't see, this virus that's making all this uncertainty, and it's affecting kind of workload. And a lot of companies thinking they might go back to normal. But I guess there's also some companies where we experienced in our own company, there were certain roles that just weren't full-time roles. We had full-time staff in them, and things have become more efficient, but it's very hard, to scrab around trying to give people jobs to do. But equally, you can't have a conversation to say, will you accept a part-time job? So are there opportunities for this to become a much more long-term arrangement between two companies?
Yeah, so what you're describing there, I think, is what we understand as employee sharing. So the idea that two companies enter a partnership, a contract, in which they understand, for instance, my chief marketing officer can support my business absolutely fine 3 days as opposed to 5 days a week. So I can loan them out to support your business on the other 2 days per week. And this way they split their, effectively their work between two businesses, but knowing that one parent company is the one that pays their full-time wages.
Okay, so and would they? So I find it's genuinely a really fascinating business model. So I'm probably going into more questions than I would normally do. But in terms of this as well, so the opportunity, but I guess when most people they get a recruitment consultant to get people, there is a time period by which they're taking a fee. Now, I'm guessing with the Hive, this is a long-term thing. So if they decide to do this in a permanent arrangement, are you infinitum going to be taking your percentage?
Not at all. I'm really, again, glad that you're asking the right questions here. So one of the things that we felt, if we are claiming that we're providing this positive social impact, we really want to make sure that the whole proposition is as ethical as possible. And one of the terms that have been included is an exit clause that allows two businesses who find out that, listen, this is going really well. So let's say thank you to the Hive. We pay them a matching introduction compensation fee, which is equivalent to 6 months of whatever 10% fee would have been. And that would be it. They free themselves from any obligation to pay us that 10%. So it allows them to sort of establish that business-to-business collaboration on the long term. Now, you made reference to recruitment agencies, which is interesting because a lot of the times I'm talking to people and say, oh, I'm not interested in talking to recruitment agencies. I'm like, I'm not a recruitment agency.
Yeah, it's very clear that you're not. I didn't mean to say that, yeah.
Exactly. So the good thing for a hiring party is that being part of this does not actually involve them paying a single penny above their budget, because they are actually paying whatever the wages set are. And we take 10% from the parent company, who is happy to see that 90% come their way, because the alternative is worse, as I mentioned to you before.
Yeah. And what about in terms of liabilities? So obviously as an employer, you have liabilities if you do something wrong and there's, I don't know, bullying or harassment case or something else. How does that work? So who is legally accountable for that employee in this arrangement?
So in these arrangements, we've actually replicated wherever you normally see between a consultancy and a business client. And that's why I was using that analogy, because it makes businesses feel more comfortable when they say, oh, I'm working on a contract that I feel familiar with. This is very conventional. It's the same as if you send a contractor on site, and if the client says, now this person has to work in my site, then that client has to make sure that they have the right insurance in place and anything related to their welfare and well-being. We've basically brought that set of terms or understandings into the contract that we've prepared them with.
So would it be, so you've got it in the contract. So for example, if company A doesn't exchange with company B, company B turns out to some naughty things going on in company B, and their employee wants to bring a charge. Is it company A? I suppose it depends what's written into the contract. It would be company B that needs to take the consequence because it's written into the contract versus company A.
Yes, okay. But what makes things a little bit easier for us is because we now have shifted. We've all had a crash course in how to run businesses with remotely based staff. So this actually works in our favor in that about 90% of the staff being shared are all able to support the work remotely. So liability is limited most of the time only on the protection of data, which is something that remains also the responsibility of the hosting company to say, this is the VPN you have to use, this is the software you have to use, we have to provide you with the machine, etc.
Cool. And what's your dream then for the Hive in terms of where do you want to take it?
Globally. The next step is Europe and the US, and then hopefully globally. And it's interesting, we're at a stage where we're trying to focus on the UK as our pilot market. We are a startup, it's still not even the first year of operation, but we're getting a lot of requests from Japan, from India, from the US, from different parts of Europe, from the Middle East, telling us this makes sense, let's bring it on. And it feels like this is something that the world, at least the new and future way of working, would like to give it a try. And the vision we have is that within the next 5 years, it would have expanded globally.
Globally, wow. Okay, so that's brilliant. Is anyone doing what you're doing now? Anyone else?
We found out that there was a charity that was running in the UK about 10 years ago, but it didn't sustain, mainly because of the lack of adequate technology and development of legal structure that allows something like this to work. So it was really, it was unfortunate because it was the wrong time. But we got the chance to speak to the guy who started it. And he was recommending that we need to speak to politicians and influencers, etc., etc. But it's easier if you're a non-profit organization. If you're running a hard business, then people are not going to endorse you that easily. So that's one example that we knew in the UK. We are not aware of anything like this in Europe. We are aware that there is a business in Australia that has done something similar, and it's been going on for the past 7 years, but only recently has started to see really strong traction, which we suspect is a natural result of the pandemic.
Yeah, so you've got obviously this perfect time, and you're saying we. So tell us who is the Hive right now?
Yeah, so I mentioned the chap called Colin Walton, who is someone that Nick actually knows from a previous life. So I was lucky enough to be surrounded by different advocates, people who loved the idea and chipped in. They jumped in either to help it with their time and skills or to help it with small financial injection. So I've got a bunch of people who are shareholders, but right now we are a core of 4 people, 4 core executive co-founders. Myself, I've got a chief financial officer, a technical guru, and a marketing officer. And the 4 of us are the ones that are right now preparing ourselves to go and speak to investors, hopefully in this second quarter.
Okay, exciting. So that's the big focus, getting the investment. So is the investment, and you're going to use that investment for the develop the platform, for your marketing, all of the above,
exactly those two. In fact, exactly those 2
Okay.
things. So develop the product and push in terms of marketing growth. Yeah.
So in terms of right now, though, for us on this course, obviously we're all quite interested and excited about what you're doing, and we're coming in across companies now. What kind of things should we be listening out for that might make them really good people to come to you? So things we might hear people from other companies saying, and how would you like us to recommend them come to you? What kind of things do you want us to be saying about you?
Well, I guess there are 2 types. One company that actually perhaps is going through difficulties, or of people who are at risk of losing their jobs, but they're not quite sure what to do about it, and they have a good relationship with their employer, for instance. In which case, we can invite them both and explain to them this is what can be done to help save the job until things, go back to a better place. But the other type of businesses who do not necessarily have a bad situation going on, they tend to be those who are open for collaboration, innovative way of looking at how they manage their human capital, but also how to access, external resources. And one interesting thing here is that there has been a growing interest in avoiding the ugly side of the gig economy. The gig economy is obviously very, very, very like an amazing concept. It helps a lot of businesses access huge pools of talent, but protection of employees with rights for employees is not something that has yet been achieved in the gig economy area. So companies that are keen on making sure that they can avoid contributing to that negative side of the gig economy will see this as a beneficial route.
And can you help people? Can you help people now? I know because you're looking for funding to, but yeah. Are you open for business right now?
Oh yes. So we launched in the second quarter last year, and so far we've got just over 150 businesses in the UK that have signed up, and we've started generating early revenue. So we feel like we've got a concept. We've proven there's a whet appetite, and we are able to make money out of this concept. So all the big boxes that can be ticked before we speak to investors hopefully have been ticked, and we have a proven concept as such.
Fantastic. And so is there an ideal type of company right now? I understand the problems they're facing, but if to try and step change towards your ambitions going global, are there particular companies that you've got your eye on?
Yes. So we're focusing right now on companies that are looking to bring in experts in applying data analytics when it comes to marketing and business growth and business development. We actually only recently decided that this year we're going to focus on the 2 tech hubs between Leeds and Manchester, because everybody is gravitating towards Greater London, but we're realizing actually there are other areas that are seeing this growth of fintech, legal tech, industries. So we are focusing on those.
That's good for us to know. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, look, I'm going to get told off by Adam in a minute. He's very politely sent me a couple of messages. So I'm going to hand out, if other people have got questions, because I think it's absolutely fascinating business, and I think we all really want to wish you well, and it sounds brilliant. You've got 150 companies signed up already. Completely get it. And I really love that idea of taking the ugly side out of the gig economy. That is just brilliant, because you can see there's a real purpose from this, as well as it just makes total sense business-wise. So but I want to let other people have a chance to ask some of their questions as well.
Sure.
Yeah, Nick.
That's fascinating. Thank you both. Hassan, a couple of questions. Well, a point and then a question really. So I wonder if the personal development side is a real way in, actually, because I think I get the business model and how that might benefit businesses, but actually I'm thinking through my experience of where employees would encourage people to take on non-exec directorships to develop their skills. There's a similar angle here. Is that something that, are you getting some interest on that side of things?
Yes, and it's, in fact, it is more when you speak to the bigger corporates, bigger clients look at the vision of how we can upskill our existing staff, and it's easier when they put them like in the thick of it with smaller companies where there's no room for them to hide away. So it's a really interesting concept. And a nice analogy here is what you see, I don't know if you've got football fans here, but when you see in clubs in the Premier League, for instance, you know, they loan out players to other clubs in different divisions or different leagues, and then they can come back ready to break into the first team. And actually the same in the business world.
I've seen a lot when I used to work in corporate banking, that a lot of accountants would kind of second people into corporate to learn that kind of the other side of the equation. And just another question: are you have any intention of opening this to individuals in future, or will it always be a relationship with business?
To be honest with you, considering our early stage right now, it would be wiser to keep it business to business, simply because the B2C or C2C market is already crowded with other, you know, relatively good opportunities out there. But something related to the gig economy that sort of steers us away until we feel more comfortable that we're not contributing to the negative side of things.
Any other questions?
I like the furlough scheme between businesses. That's
really nice.
That was neat. That people.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, we refer to it as Sherlow, and there's been a lot of
Sherlow. I like it. We've got a new term. I
know. We were thinking about like using it as a trademark, but unfortunately, only in the UK it might be easily spelled. Outside the UK, it might get a little bit tricky. So it's a branding question more than anything else.
And so, if anyone else has got other questions, I can be cheeky with if I've got time. It's just so, how did you come to this idea? So tell us a little bit about you. And how you've ended up doing this and why you've chosen this route.
Yeah, so my background is in engineering. I worked in bionics and in the medical industry and in the nuclear industry, things that I thought were really fun, exciting. And I was surrounded by really talented people. But the companies I worked for, and I don't know if we've got other people in the panel today who have been working in the engineering industry, but somehow it can experience a little bit of inflexibility. If it ain't broken, don't fix it, don't touch it. Sort of thing. So I had a situation where I could see around us that, you know, we've got projects that have been paused, delayed, pulled from underneath our feet, and we're not able to do anything about it. And as a business, we had to face that difficult decision. We cut the wages across the board or make some really talented and loyal people go. Despite the fact I could look at us, including myself, I come from a different industry, different background. That person comes from a different one, another one. And I could see that those people individually can be used as currency to build new business-to-business agreements with our companies. They can themselves turn into the consultants that our company can use to loan out. And I've always sort of like thought about it, but I never saw anybody doing it. And now I'm in a stage in my life where I wanted to establish a business that allows me to run it from anywhere around the world. I thought this is a good opportunity. Let's give it a go. And I created this virtual enterprise that can service this proposition.
So you need to just make sure you remember us when you become this leader of this global empire. Little old us to say we were there at the beginning, people. No, but I think it's a really good, and I could see how it works because we've been in a situation where actually exactly this in a previous company where we had just for a time period, we knew that things were going to change in the future. And it was just this awful feeling about just people knew that they weren't being utilised. So it's actually really demotivating to staff. They had all these skills and talent. They weren't being utilised, but we knew that we would need them in the future. And they knew that you were finding stuff for them to do and they had pseudo roles to kind of keep them warm. And it just wasn't effective. And the chance to develop skills and get more experience, especially for companies that have had employees. On my last company, the average employment was 15 years. People stay with them a long time. So you don't get any fresh thinking. Get quite stale as a company as well. So that's another angle to it, is just getting a bit of freshness in there as well. But no, I think it's an excellent company. It's really, and actually you explained it really well, I think, because the fact that I'm guessing, everyone's very quiet and polite, except for Nick. No, you're polite, but it's the fact that actually it's so clear how you've explained it. We can get a sense of it. We can get the sense of the why, the value you get from it, and actually how it operates, which I think is a great job.
Really good.
Thank you, Natasha. To be honest with you guys, I wholeheartedly believe this is an idea. This is a concept that will be part of the future. It's just a matter of when is the right time and who are the right people to make it happen. Throughout the time, throughout the months that passed, I felt more and more that this is certainly something that will happen.
And I think strategically it makes sense as well to focus on a particular type of industry, because if you're trying to kind of pair companies up as well, you could go scattergun and they won't get any kind of results because there's nobody on your platform they want to work with. So if you actually have a focus, doesn't mean you can't go to every industry, but you start with something and get that
You're
working.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I felt that it would be wise for us to just focus on the 1% of the potential market and deliver a solution that works perfectly for that 1%, and then prove that concept and then scale from there, grow from there. And hence what I shared with you earlier, that we recently decided, Manchester and Leeds, SEO, SEM area, that would be interesting.
Fantastic. Well done. Great job. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And if there's anything we can help you with anytime, obviously you've got this as a community, and we'll all be looking out for you.
Incredibly grateful. Thank you.
Superb. Thanks both. That was really, really good. Very insightful.